let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. And in terms of the previous moments, Tracy, I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to sign tonight, obviously. But anyone see any corrections for the previous January minutes, or anyone like to make a motion to approve?
I'll motion to approve.
Okay, I'll go ahead and second that. And hopefully I'll be able to be in person at the next meeting, so I can sign for December and January. Any members from the public? I don't think so, but since I'm not there, I might be missing someone. Any members from the public who would like to speak at this point?
There's no one here, thanks.
Wait, and I cannot remember who signed up for the monthly ice speaker. Rihanna, is that you?
Yep, it was. So for this one, if folks could share their favorite movie or CD or kind of something other than a book that you found in the library. And so I'll just go ahead and start. For a movie, I found Kon-Tiki, which is based on a true story where someone was trying to prove that it was possible for the population of the Polynesian islands for them to have sailed there, and so he built a craft and proved that it was possible, and so that the whole movie is like his journey to prove everybody wrong. So.
Okay, I'll jump in next. This is not media, but I unfortunately did not make it out this weekend, but I've so enjoyed seed packets from the library in the past and look forward to checking those out this year.
I can go next. So I just now realized that kind of some classic musicals are not necessarily in the children's section. I kind of assumed that if it was rated G, it would be in the kids section, and that's not the case. And so like Sound of Music, Annie, Newsies, they're upstairs, and our family recently discovered that, and we watched Annie recently.
That's the online group. Anyone here?
I'm trying to think. So, I don't know that I have a specific single DVD, but it was 2003, 2004, somewhere in there, and I was living on my own in this tiny, no way could have been legal, like trailer apartment kind of shack in the woods in New York State, and I was working at the Valley Cottage Library, and I was new to that library, which was not a humongous library, but very beloved by the community. And they had an amazingly curated DVD collection. And in particular, their foreign films, subtitled, just all over the place. And as I worked there, I got to know the woman who was in charge of developing that collection, and surprise, she was super passionate about foreign films. So while I was living by myself with nothing going on in the woods, I would come home from work with like a stack of DVDs, and I would just watch all these foreign films. So that still sticks out to me all these years later as some kind of cultural education that I had that year that I was there, getting to discover all of these things from outside the United States that I know I never would have heard about otherwise. It was cool. It's cool.
Look up the name of it. So one that I found was Kiss the Ground. It is a documentary narrated by Woody Harrelson. and our library has it. And it was about, it's basically about, you know, if the soils die, we die.
Yes.
And so, you know, the carbon, it's not supposed to be up in the air, it's essentially supposed to be in the ground. So carbon, yes, it is good when it's in the soil. And so how, you know, it took, you know, you go back in history to the Dust Bowl and how, you know, these mass agriculture, it's really destroying our plains and our natural healthy soil. And so how we can reverse that. And it was really interesting. And I think, you know, as we look at council priorities and, you know, what we can do at the local level, considering Longmont has a history of agriculture and farming, that, you know, just kind of tied it in. So I was fascinated by that one. That was really interesting.
Yes, I saw that too.
I'm having a really hard time thinking of anything specific, but it is sort of a book, but also sort of not. The Wonder books that are new to our children's collection, which other libraries have. I've used those with my daughter, and they're very, very fascinating because it's kind of like a read-along story. The actual like device that reads the story is in the book, so you can kind of listen along and actually read the book along with the audio. So it's been kind of an interesting experience because I grew up with like the CDs where you would listen to the book on a CD with the actual physical book as well. So this is kind of a new modernization of that, and it's really interesting to kind of have that as an option for
What's it called?
They're called Wonder books.
Wonder books, okay.
Yeah, and so last but not least, I'll just say Wonder Books it's a newer thing that we've started to receive within the last
We
year.
have some of them,
Yeah.
No,
You know, they're certainly not the cheapest item because it's technology built with a book, but they're really, really cool and popular. And then Cynthia, just since you meant, I think it was Cynthia that mentioned the seed library, right? Anyway, I just want to mention we had our, you know, kickoff on Sunday for, you know, the free seed packet stuff, and had over 400 people here on Sunday. It just gets bigger and bigger, and I have to acknowledge that that's in large part funded by the Friends of the Library, like many things here, but that's a huge thing that we couldn't do without them. And we have some sponsors too around that are contributing free things to that for that program. So after all those plugs and everything, boy, this one, this was easy for me. A friend of mine years ago, or a colleague, I should say, when I lived in Northern California, told me about a movie she loved. It's called The Red Violin. I don't know if anyone's heard of this. And I borrowed it from the library, and she was just fascinated with it. When she told me about it, it was actually in the theater, but I didn't see it then. I waited, and so it's really worth finding if you haven't watched it. It's truly the story of this violin. It's like that through the violin's life and its experience with all these people through history, and it bounces back between the violins, you know, when it's built by this like Italian violin maker, and there's a lot, I probably shouldn't say I'll give away the story, but it's like, and then it bounces to current times where it's being auctioned. And so you hear integrated all these stories.
Stradivarius?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I saw that movie like long.
Yeah, and because it's from the early 2000s,
Yeah,
for sure.
Right.
It's just such a good story. It still ranks as one of my favorite films to watch, just because it's, you know, you start watching and realizing it's really the story of the violin and the people it affected, right? Not so much. Well, that's the story. Anyway, I was last. Move on.
Samuel Jackson.
And Samuel
Yeah,
Jackson,
yeah,
he plays
look that
the
up.
auctioneer in current time, which was an interesting casting
Wow.
thing. And so you get a little of Samuel Jackson-esque things here and there, you know, with his not taking anything from anybody, but it's really, but he's also very different. If you think of anything he's done, you would never picture him in this role.
That's a great question. Thanks for asking that one. I just tried to take notes on some of these. Okay, I'm gonna volunteer to do the next one. It's been a while. I'd like to continue to keep this as an agenda item if anyone has different thoughts. I know it does take up a little time, but it's lovely to get to know everyone in this manner as well. Let's move on now to our more serious business. I put the budget process update under new business, and I hope to bring this up under old business in the next few months. Just asking John for an update. I know the process, my understanding of the process will start pretty soon, and my hope is that this board will have a strong understanding of what's being requested this year, so we can, in our role as an advisory board, really communicate to council what we agree with the priorities, and hopefully we'll be able to learn more about that if we talk about it every month. So John, you want to share us a little bit about the timing and any particulars?
Yeah, so, well, the timing, this will be my second year at it. I think for us staff, we start talking about it, getting the system probably in March, so pretty soon. And, there's a whole timeline, and as we get closer, I'll share that so that, this board knows of deadlines and things coming up. But outside of that, what I can share with you, given where this library is, between the election and then my budget requests, effectively none of them getting filled at all. So my intention this year is really to put the exact same budget request back in. There was a lot there, and I'll be sure to update this board or remind this board, I guess, because I did share it last year of what that was. There's a whole slew of budget requests between personnel, a high priority supporting outreach with staffing and funding to support that department, which is now still a department of one with no budget except for the person working. And then other increases would be to collections across the board, both physical and digital. Pretty substantial increase there, if I remember right, to have us be able to add not just physical but also digital collections to really meet a population of this size and offerings that we should be providing. And then a number of things throughout, which I'll get into more detail with this board next time. There was one component of the budget request cycle last year that I put in, which was to add it was in addition to what the election would have funded, which was a full-blown branch library, but I also added to my budget request, if you might remember, basically like a storefront type of branch. This year I will likely leave that out. That was fairly intentional last year, given everything going on, but this year I need to focus on just the funding of the library and not really trying to add things like that. At least that's where I stand right now. But outside of that, it'll pretty much be the same request, which was amounted to somewhere in the $700,000 or $800,000 of budget increase to our current budget.
Well, thanks, John. I didn't expect there to be too much on this meeting. Just wanted to start the conversation. And I think that we can also discuss in the next two meetings. Susie will lean on your guidance as well. Help us to communicate some of this to council if they want to try to appear at a meeting. We've emailed in the past, so I think we could craft some of that going forward. I don't have anything else on this agenda item for right now. Does anyone any questions or comments, knowing we'll dive more deeply next time. Jamie, go for it.
I have a question. It does not have to be answered right now, but it's more of a can we think about it, which is there any sense to the strategy of sort of narrowing down the budget items that we approach council with to those things that are essential and operational, and having the items that we would definitely benefit for, you could even make a case for needing, but they're not strictly operational, they are like growing, expanding. Because when I hear you say, like, let's hold off on the storefront, my immediate thought was just like, I think that's good, because the more that we can encourage or persuade council to see Longmont City's role as really funding operations, the day-to-day. Let's get there first, because that would then create an opportunity for volunteer groups such as the Friends to start to move away toward focusing on advancing the mission and expanding. And so it's just a baby step towards starting to separate those functions into what I will humbly say were their rightful places.
I mean, I can address that in part. You know, I think you're right. The storefront. I think that'll clog things up, like in the sense of what are my core operational needs. As I'm trying to visualize the budget requests I have from last year to this year now, that's the only thing out there that I could say is not a critical operational component. Everything else in there is in my mind. That's not to say it couldn't still be prioritized, and I did that when the results of the election came in, and I went and talked to the city manager about, well, my budget request, what if anything can I get? And the answer was 0. But I went in there prioritizing even within that.
Right.
Figuring, and so the higher prioritization in there was certainly personnel costs to help staff things that we need,
Right.
which is always the most expensive. Then it went down. But, you know, if I think of it as the bigger picture, it's all there. I mean, we need some more staff, we need to spend more on collections. We definitely need a programming budget. I've never, I mean, that's just, we've talked about that here before. I mean, that's a core service anymore, just like collections. It's been a long-standing thing. So the fact that we don't have that. So it would be hard to start outside of the satellite branch, whatever you want to call it. Everything else left is pretty much falls within what you just said in my mind.
Yeah. It's not that you would change necessarily what you were going to do, it's how you talk about it. It's the language that you use that you could authentically, or one could authentically represent that list as core needs, right? Operational needs, like this before anything else. And there's a lot of else that we would really like to have. That's all.
Understood. I agree.
Okay.
Thanks, Jamie and John, for that clarification and context. I think that's a good point, though, too, in how we communicate to the council, and especially, you know, emphasize the programming is a core component that's not being funded currently. So let's continue the conversation on that as well. Any other comments or questions right now about the budget? Right, so sorry, this is Mary Pam, by the way. We do have a number of public joining us. A little belatedly and unexpectedly.
Well, she's not allowed to comment at this point when we ask that.
That's fine with me.
I'm just teasing.
I'll let her know. Okay, well, like I said, this is really an introduction. We'll bring it up next month. For old business, the first two items are really just updates that came from the action item report. So I didn't put that as an agenda item. I just thought we could maybe discuss a few. If there are other updates from that, please feel free to John. But these were two of the ones that I wanted to touch in about. To ask if there have been any. Last time the conversation was that for St. Vrain, dual card prospects, it pretty much stalled. And so I just wanted to check in and see if there had been any movement.
At least from my side, no. I mean, I had sent Susie's the contacts I had meetings with, just in case there was any chance. But yeah, from my standpoint, the last it stood from the district's perspective, it was going to be difficult because they needed it to be a signature to opt in, and that's how it's been working. When they did the testing, they weren't getting enough parents to sign, and so it's that was the last communication I heard from the district, at least for myself, was they don't see it moving forward unless that changes.
Yeah, that was essentially, I did speak with our city manager because, I mean, this is an intergovernmental agreement. So one of the things, so I had spoken to the district and they told me the same thing, that it was going to be really hard to navigate. And, I just kept hearing about reasons why it wasn't going to work. But we have signed, I mean, I remember approving that, and you have the intergovernmental agreement that is a signed document by both representatives from the city and the school district. So it is a legal binding contract. So, my feeling is we need to, uphold the contract, and looking at the language on there, it's not very specific about that it has to be one way or the other, an opt-in or an opt-out. I think preferentially we want the opt-out. Is that correct?
That's my
Yes,
thought to
yes.
make it easier, but I'm not a school
Yes.
board. I'm not a school
Yeah.
administrator, so
And I've
be able to
noticed
do
that the school district, because when we do Blue Sky Bridge or GRIP, traditionally they had been opt-outs, and now it seems the last few years are, under the school district, everything is becoming, you have to sign the permission slip. And I think what has happened is that in the opt-out, maybe kids aren't giving the parents the paper or something, so they didn't know to even that they could opt out. So I think that there had been some conflict with that. So that's kind of what was the feedback I was receiving. So, how could we make this functional? How could we make this work? Especially for kids, for me it's an equity issue. For kids who least have access to books and, parents being able to take them to, to the bookstore or, pick up those books, that this then provides that gap, that closes that gap for kids who are least able to attain those books, or maybe don't have internet at home, so they have to come over here. So those kinds of issues.
I had wondering about that after we last talked about this issue. I don't know if it was at last month's meeting or, and it came to me as part of my parenting duties, which is, and I don't know the IT behind it and everything, but what I remember hearing is that part of the lack of enthusiasm around the opt-in was how, like, the system was going to be able to work with opt-outs a lot more easily than it was going to be able to work with opt-ins.
Trying to figure out who signed the permission slip and is that what you're?
Yes.
Yes.
Just
Okay.
like how you, I guess, integrate the data. But we have, our district has Infinite Campus. And there are certain forms that are created and housed online that parents are made reminded and communicated to about completing for various things. And I think that if you could set that up electronically so that the parent-facing piece is you see opt-in or opt-out, you pick one or the other, and then basically on the back end, as long as everything else was an opt-in, you can just export that opt-out list and bring it into whatever. I don't know if it's cleaner to do it that way or it gives you more options for working with the responses.
I mean, on that specifically, that's a school district issue.
Yeah.
For importing, for the library standpoint, the technology is there to import all these student IDs. But basically that has to happen, and then they'll know which IDs they can put into basically a file that we take.
Okay.
So that once it hits the library, that's been worked out.
Okay.
So you're right, it could be a technology issue that can be handled in a way to make it work better.
Just like that platform.
Yeah.
Everything is so in your face.
Yeah.
And to your point, Susie, about the did the parent ever get the thing,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I have that happen more than once with my elementary school age child. I was like, why are we sending papers home in backpacks? Can't you put this in Infinite Campus, and if I forget about it, it sends me a reminder, or I see it when I log
Or if the teacher forgets to send home the Thursday folders that then become next Monday's folder, because
Digital signatures are real.
who does that
Yeah.
anymore?
I mean, the other thing
Digital
too
now.
with this is when I was having conversations, because when this started, this was not necessarily age restricted at all, which is ideal. However,
Yes.
my thought was, we're really trying to get digital access so that they have access to our databases and things like that.
Yes.
And it was the idea of one of the people from the school district that I was working with in this said, well, maybe we should just make this for high school students initially, because
And then-
the school district doesn't place restrictions on content they can access,
okay.
or on some level, in comparison,
Yes.
whatever that means. Which is great in the sense that, because obviously as a public library, we don't restrict access to any content. That's up to the child's parent, guardian,
Yes.
blah.
Yeah.
So if that's the case and it's only high school, there's, at least in my mind, and I'm probably oversimplifying this, that makes it a lot cleaner because you don't have to worry about the younger ages and
Yes.
what content they may be able to access, because the high school students don't have the same restrictions, according to what I was told. So I really tried to push that in the sense like that's a great idea, and that's who's going to use this stuff the most.
Yes. Yeah.
And then all the other students already have access to ebooks through Sora, which is the Libby version of for schools, and that's already content restricted.
Yeah.
Like that's built into how Sora works. I'm talking about just the library stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know. That's there's nothing that's developed as far as I know, except for what Susie shared as far as having some conversations. But
Okay, well, thanks, Jen and Susie, for those updates. If there is agreement, we can bring it back up.
I did solve it for them.
You did solve it. I was like going to say, so it sounds like we almost have to solve the problem for
I
them.
feel like I did.
They have to say yes to John's solution.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean,
They have to accept
I
his
would,
solution.
but to that point,
Yeah.
I would be more than willing to have another conversation or conversations with the
Okay.
powers that be. Happy to have you and Harold there, or anybody
Okay.
that can help, support where I'm coming from and what I'm saying. It would
Yes.
be to help guide that conversation. I'm
Sure.
more than happy to do that, but
Okay.
Right, then trying to unmute. Okay, well, thanks for those updates, and hopefully there will be movement at some point in the future, and we'll bring it back up if so. Another thing that I know is a long-term project is CAPS. I finally remember what that stands for, Children and Teens. The shelving update. So John, if there's anything on that you wanted to share.
Yeah, this will be much quicker because it's not a hot topic necessarily, but so we've been working with a consultant. We had everything in order to get materials ordered. I signed off on it, and then one of the vendors, as a part of this, is stopping operations of a particular product to another company, or they're moving operations to another state. I can't remember what's happening. So my consultant found a different vendor, and they came back with a quote, which is within reason of what we were originally quoted. It's a little bit more, but it would help to not have to wait, because I don't know with this movement of warehouses what that means. I mean, that could be a few months, and it could be a year for all I know. So I just said move forward with it. I signed off on it. They're confident they can still get everything shipped here in mid-April. By mid-April, all the materials, and then we would be able to, they would be able to then move forward with removing all the shelving and have everything done before summer reading, which is the goal. But if there's any delays at all, that's going to push materials not getting here until May or mid-May, that'll be a challenge, and then I'm just going to have to push this until August or September. Not a huge deal. That's not like a year or so out. I mean, at least I know where we're standing. But that's the update on that. It's going to be fantastic when this is all said and done. Just to refresh that area, it's new shelving. The shelves themselves will be a bright white, and then some woods and a lot of color end panels. Okay. And then we have some shelving that's on a combo, like curved shelving on one side and seating on the other, so that you can actually have story time by the back windows. It made a lot of better use of space in that sense, so I'm excited about it. And so, knock on wood, there's no delays in ordering. As far as I know, the order's been placed.
Thanks, John. Hopefully before summer reading.
Yeah, it would be too disruptive to interrupt that. So it's either going to have to be done before that, or wait until that's over.
Any questions or comments on those items? Wait, so we started talking about this last month, a long time ago, about Longmont staff. And one of the things we're going to do is pause having staff members come to these meetings. I would love for us to learn more, but I think it's important to give them that time. But I just wanted to ask John if there were other movements right now that we should be aware of. I know last time we talked a little bit about limiting some of the tabling and some of the larger city events, which we are of course supportive of. But kind of what other items or areas, once again, really thinking about burnout and trying to protect from all the necessary, trying to make that balance with what's necessary and what can be cut back right now. So John, any updates on that?
Just a couple, yeah. So you're right. I mean, effectively kind of got paused. I was bringing staff here for some Library 101 kind of stuff, which I would like to continue at some point, but it's just a little challenging with everything going on with staffing, and then we've had some turnover recently, so it's just, every month Cynthia and I meet a week before this meeting and kind of talk about the agenda. And I finally just said last week, I keep saying well, maybe next month, but I have to be realistic and just say let's just table this until I feel like I can bring staff in here again. It's just something I can't prioritize right now, even though I know it's much appreciated. So we'll get there. And as far as festivals, it's an outreach component, right? When we go to these big festivals and set up a library booth or a tent, whatever. So I spoke with Lily, our outreach coordinator, about that and prioritize some of these events. And even the ones that we still might go to, of how to downsize it to reduce the staff requirement of how we staff those events and the activities we have. I mean, we always went all out for these things. So it's not just being at like Cinco de Mayo with a tent, but we would be there in a booth with staff, and then we have all kinds of games, and you can make a craft and all this stuff. And I just said, you know, anything like that we do, we need to limit the staff requirement to be there, and limit what we're doing. I mean, we don't really need all that stuff. And some of this is coming from Lily herself, right, as the outreach coordinator, acknowledging that, you know, there's outreach, which is like connecting with people when she goes to the parks and in the schools. And then these are festivals, as she calls them, which it's great for the visibility, but really the return on investment of that isn't really as great. It's not that it's not valuable. And with all the staffing and everything we needed, I would be happy to be at all of them. But it's just not something. So there'll be a number of them that we probably won't participate in that level this year. One of them is, and some of this is a trade-off, I should add too. So if you think about a big city event like Rhythm at Roosevelt, so last year the library did two things. Not only did we have a booth that had crafts and required no less than 12 staff for the day, we also had to staff it to help just with the event itself because it's so big, right? So we had people helping with volunteers, coordinating that or other tasks that as a division of recreation and culture, we need to help recreation staff with these. So if I remove the tabling part, I have more staff to help with the actual event, which is truly what's needed. And it's valuable. And Rhythm specifically, I mean, people are going to hear music, they enjoy food trucks, they're not, and the library visitors that come to the tent, they're already library visitors. We're not garnering new. So that's the to make a long story long. Anyway, that's what that's all about. So there'll be some we do. It's hard when you start thinking about certain events and what you prioritize or not, you know, and we're always certainly conscientious of reaching out to specific communities within Longmont, right? So Cinco de Mayo is very important for that reason as a cultural event. So Lily really wanted to be there, and I agree. So that's one we'll still be at, but really we'll scale it down. So we're there, but not in the same way we were last year, which required no less than 10 staff. Because of how we approached it, right? We did it to ourselves. And I would love to do that, but we don't need to.
So much work.
It's a lot of work.
Physically.
And honestly, when people visit your tent, you've been to plenty of events, I mean, people want swag. So I'd rather spend the money on like a free pen that says Longmont Library, and then that's it. You know, you don't need to make the pen like you would. So we were in agreement there. So there'll be a few things like that, and we'll be at Pride, but that's a little bit easier to staff because it's a shorter event. It's only 4 hours. But in the same sense as a cultural event that hits communities that we want to make sure we have a presence at, that's also one of them. That's the biggest conversation we've had, Cynthia and the board. So as far as capacity, other budgetary effects aren't necessarily about capacity, it's just more realization of things like collection budget numbers. You know, one thing to share in this realm certainly is we made a number of cuts to our physical magazine collection, which I am starting to get some comments about. This is largely budgetary. Last year we overspent on physical magazines, but not all of it. And some of it that's being pulled from those shelves are publications that already ceased in publication. We were just keeping back issues to fill space. So there's no need. And then other titles up there, we were very conscientious about what was decided to cancel the print to, and a high percentage of those are already available in Libby through our digital magazines. That's not everyone's cup of tea, right? People like to hold a physical magazine as much as I like to hold a physical book, but those are hard decisions, and so that's something that's not necessarily staff capacity, although on some level it is for the staff to have to maintain the collection, but that's really not the reason why.
Thanks, John. You mentioned, did I hear you right, that there had been some turnover?
Yeah, a little bit. So we've had one of our librarians up in adult services. Her name was Devin Smith. Well, her name still is Devin Smith. She's not quite dead to me. But she left. Her last day was last week. Family reasons. She's moving to Missouri somewhere. Really was hard for her to leave, but she had a big role here. She managed our homebound service, and so one of the staff up there wanted to resume that responsibility, so we had the benefit of that person getting a good week or 10 days of overview and training from Devin to that person to help ease that transition for such an important service, so that was good. And Devin also oversaw all the Libby collection. She was our collection development for all our e-content. So we have another internal staff member up there that wanted to take that over. And that's a good opportunity. The person that's taking that over doesn't have experience in collection development, so we're creating this opportunity. He will learn this from the department manager, Penny, who we met at one of these when she was one of the ones that came here for the adult department head, get some coaching there, and part of the requirement for him to take that over will be to do some collection development coursework. So he's very excited, so I think that's great, to do that. And then we've had a couple of people within our technical services area leave somewhat recently. Well, one was just Friday as well. Last Friday. Also family reasons. One of our catalogers is leaving, but that's shifting some responsibility. We had a part-time Spanish cataloger that was recently brought in, but she already had a job that was already nearly full-time, so I think the idea was great, but she couldn't manage both and decided that she needed to stick with the other one. But what I will say, if there's an advantage to something like that, in some conversations I had with the department head for tech services that oversees that, I proposed the thought that other staff, because we have other bilingual staff within that department that could do Spanish cataloging, and then there's not a great deal of it. There's some that maybe doesn't warrant a whole position. So I'm taking that position, and I'm talking with HR now, and I intend to transfer those funds to outreach and actually have a position that supports that. Part-time, but it's something to get us somewhere. So good question. I'm glad you brought that up. Cynthia, I was going to put that in my director update, but it's just fine here. So so that's some of the recent turnover we've had.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Any sense of, I'm sure this is starting right now, but any sense of timing when those could be filled, or is that just?
So with the part-time Spanish cataloger, so that'll be internal. So I mean, although we have to, there's a little timing issue there because we don't have a job description would basically be an outreach assistant, right? Whatever you want to call it. So we kind of have to create that and get that through HR and then post the position. So there's a little timing there, but Devin, the librarian position up in adult services, that is just about ready to be posted, and actually with that, in speaking with the department head there, because some of the responsibilities that she had are being absorbed by other staff, we are posting that job to be someone that does more outreach to the business community, and it's like a lot of big public libraries out there will actually have a business librarian. We're not going as far as to say that or recruit it like that, but the intention is to be really be a counterpart to what Lily already does, but from this side of things, and kind of engage with entrepreneurs in the business community, and I'm thinking help develop partnerships there out in Longmont. The other part of this is we're requiring Spanish fluency in this job, whereas usually it's preferred or some level of that, but in this case it's required. So we really want to recruit there to help build our engagement with the growing Latino population in Longmont.
That sounds great. Will that stay as a librarian position?
It'll stay a librarian position.
That's great. All right, any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, moving on. John, let's hand it back to you
Oh, yeah.
for anything else on your search report.
Although some of that I was going to cover in my director update, so this is just fine. There's two other items I wanted to bring up. One of them I think came up last month. I think I brought up a challenge we had on a graphic novel last month. But I think in that conversation I mentioned there's some pending state legislation. Yeah. Does that sound familiar? It does.
Can we
Okay.
talk about it? Yes.
Yeah. So
We
We talk about it.
We- so-
Content materials in library.
correct.
This one.
Yeah.
Senate Bill 24049.
049. So just an update on this. Today was a hearing on this with and a lot of testimony. They call testimony. It's basically public comment.
Yeah, yeah.
It's basically
testimony.
public comment.
Yes.
But I was able to tune in for a little bit of it. I mean, it went on for hours because there was a lot of people who wanted to have something to say about it. I'm pleased to say that most of the testimony shared were in support of the bill. I think that, I might have mentioned this last month, that at the very high level, I think this is a good effort to really draw attention to the fact that maybe we do need legislation that protects this, basically our First Amendment. I mean, it's sort of ridiculous in a way that we need it, but given where we are in this climate, that's what they're trying to do and model what some other states have done. Some people call it a ban on book bans.
That's right.
It's
First Amendment right, though.
it's kind of what it is in a sense, but so they talked about that today. I'm not really sure the next steps there, but anyway.
It's coming back again on Wednesday, the 28th at 1:30.
Okay.
That they're going to have another.
Oh, they
hearing
are.
on it.
Okay. So
Yeah,
maybe
so
they
there's
have to
another
continue.
one
This Wednesday at
this
1:30.
Wednesday at 1:30.
Those are things you can tune into, or at least audio wise. I would have liked a video to see
Yeah.
who was there.
Who
But
was
anyway,
there? Yes.
so just an update on that, but also internally, I met with our selection committee here because we have been talking about revising our request for reconsideration process that we have, and some of this might be informed by this legislation because it has some requirements in there if it's passed, which are things I would put in place anyway. Things that we don't have. So one is a residency requirement to challenge. materials in the collection. Right now, we don't state that. And I think that's important. And then the other that we debated a lot as a team, but after looking at a lot of other libraries, and the legislation doesn't state this, but I'm stating it, you have to have a a full access Longmont library card to challenge something. You have to be a library user. There's various opinions on this around the state of whether, but many libraries have implemented that. So those are a couple of things we will put in place. We will also mimic some of what the legislation says, although we came up with this before, which was to have caps. So an item that might be formally challenged, if it is, it can't be challenged again. That item cannot be challenged again for 5 years. So people can challenge it, but we're not going to review it because it was already challenged once. And then the other side of that is a cap on how many times a person or an organization can challenge something. And I don't remember what number we came up with as a team, but there was some cap on that. That way, and some of this is, unfortunately, this is in a response to not necessarily anything that's happened in this library, but it's certainly out there where organizations organize themselves and do challenge after challenge, and they flood the system, and it just like, it's kind of setting it up so that we don't run into that here.
So am I hearing that there's a cap on the number of challenges that can be made by any one entity? Is it within a certain time frame? Or
it would be in a time frame, I just don't remember when.
Okay.
I don't remember the time frame as a team that we talked about.
Yeah,
here.
that's fine.
But yes, there would be a time frame. So let's just say it's also 5 years, like the item. So if you, as an individual or an organization, challenge something, you can't challenge something. I mean, you can. It just it won't be acknowledged because you already did.
Most offensive thing.
Yeah. So you get one shot at it. So
with regard to kind of flooding the system, that made me think also what if you are inundated with a lot, what happens to the materials while they're being reviewed? Are they still available or do they get pulled while they're under review?
No, by policy, and our current policy states this actually, but it will remain. Anything that gets formally challenged through the request for reconsideration, it states in there that the item will remain on the shelves, or if they're challenging a display or a program, that it'll remain on display or the program will be canceled.
Okay, I think that's great because then you don't have to worry about being flooded. You can't use flooding the system as a strategy.
No.
Yeah.
And you haven't noticed any items disappearing
No.
from the collection?
No, we haven't had that here, and that has happened in places. So that's where we are internally on this process, and then you can look up the legislation too and kind of see what's going on there. So that's that, and then the other thing I have, which I wanted to share this group here. So I haven't even brought this up here yet, but we're gathering. Every year we gather a number of statistical components as a requirement that we file with the state library. And so I've been trying to work, and Tracy's done a lot of this, of simplifying how we gather this information, and it made it much easier to then gather data that we have in various, it's kind of like, it exists in various places. So we're kind of streamlining that, and then my marketing person took that and made basically an annual report. And what I'm trying to do is show you this really quickly. Where is it? I'm like, where did it share go? Is this visible on my screen to you folks online? So that's the agenda. You don't need to see that. This is the annual report that my marketing person compiled. And this could be something too. You know, I know this board talks about various communications with council, but it would be great to incorporate this in communications that you have and even present an annual report to council. Many boards do this. Some have requirements to do it. But I'll just show you quickly what this looks like. So it captures some key data points of what we're doing. And I will definitely send this out, so don't feel like you have to capture this out now. In fact, some of these numbers just came in today. That's why and Cynthia, when we met, I didn't mention this because I didn't have it yet. So, this is a lot of programming numbers here. You get down and then digital usage. And this, I think, is good. We're separating. So this is the 433,000 is what Longmont has done between ebooks and databases. Just ebooks is 223. But it's worth pointing out, you know, our ebook and the Libby collection is shared, right? That's a consortial partnership we have with Lafayette, Louisville, Broomfield, and Loveland. And we broke a record this year by hitting over 1 million checkouts on that between the libraries. And out of that million, we have, what, almost, well, 200,000. That's a lot of use. If you want to prove to people the library's being used, and even if they're not coming in, these are the numbers you can share, right? And then physical materials, we all got close to 1 million circulating out of this library, which is a lot of library use in a year. Almost 70,000 holds retrieved. It's probably more holds replaced, but we're not counting the ones that people decided not to pick up. That can be reported. And then it's broken down between areas here. Worth mentioning things like Discovery Passes, 1,400. That's that 100% Friends funded to go to museums and other things. Same with library things, over 500 items checked out through library things. We don't even have that large of a collection. So happy to talk through any of this, but I'll send this out, and we can even put this as old business again next month if you want, since this is new. Over 5,000 new library cards issued last year. Top digital downloads, and then there's a whole marketing to show our e-newsletter engagement here, and then our website engagement. I'm pretty sure the library's homepage is the most visited site in the entire city of Longmont website. So you get, it's really broken down here because this is the marketing person, so she got very detailed in what her realm is. And then events and programs as it relates to online. We don't do a whole lot of registration, you know, so, but that, when it says events sold out, and obviously we don't charge for them. But when we do registration, you know, author events and things, so these are 36 of them in a year. We're at full capacity. And then the last part is social media engagement, which is largely Facebook. So, again, I know I'm scrolling through fast, but I just wanted to share this with you. I'll get it to the board and
this would be something good for council.
oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. We hear presentations all the time.
And part of my conversations with staff here with our number gathering is I wanted in a way where I can extract, I don't know if it'll be this fancy,
Mhm.
but something where I could create a little quarterly report that
Yeah.
then can be presented to council to
Yeah.
show like what we're doing.
Mhm.
I just don't, I think if you don't see it, a lot of people
Mhm.
just don't know, and you hear it out there, right? Like, well, I mean, even someone today in the legislative session, I mean, he admitted he was a legislator. He's like, I love the library, I'll support anything, right? But I know for me, like, I get what I need largely without it, except that I check out physical books.
Yeah.
But I recognize people need it. And it's like, yeah, and let me show you how.
Yeah.
You know, because I just don't think that people
Yeah.
see that, so.
And that was the other point of conversation that I had with council was the hidden costs, things that we don't really see, but these are costs that are incurring. These are actions that are happening. You know, people are tapping into these digital collections a lot, but we're not, because we're not physically seeing this. You know, it doesn't mean that it's not happening. It's non-existent.
Hey, John, I have one question on one of the statistics in there. You don't have to reshare it. The very first statistic said that there was 120,000 people. Is that a duplicated or unduplicated number?
No, it's a total of people that attended programs between adult children outreach and otherwise.
Oh.
So it was
Thank
couched as engagement. So it's if you looked individually, it would add up between adult children and outreach to 123,000 people.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, John, and thanks for sending this out. I agree, this would be great for council to see. I think I've been a member of this board the longest, which is very odd to me. But in my time here, we have not presented to council, nor has it come up. So I think that's something we should do. Susie or Tracy, John, how do we make that happen? Any suggestions?
You know, we can go about a couple of ways. You know, one, the mayor can request it. When she's writing up the agenda, she can just have that put in. I can request to have that be part of a presentation or I think so we have, not general business. I think it would be a special report and presentation to request to have you all come in. But I'd probably wait until you kind of give me the cue that, okay, we're ready to present this. And I don't know if it has to be accepted by the board or whatever. So there are a couple of ways that it comes back to us. Things come back in special reports and presentations.
Yeah, Cindy, I think what Susie said's the best way would be to just try to get it on the agenda in that sense, not just try to come in during public invited we heard, but actually be on the agenda to present it as the library's 2023 annual report. And that's something that this board could decide. You know, I mean, the report's there, so you know, I don't think there would be much tweaking to it at this point. It would be much more of a matter of timing and when people here decide who and when people. I mean, that stuff gets booked out a little bit, so you know, it's hard to know when it would be, but you can kind of put that in process.
From my perspective, it would make sense to go ahead and put it in process. What did the other board members think?
I agree.
And of course, yeah, I'm not sure when that works too. Is that the board members presenting or the director? Or I mean, I'm happy to. I can't contextualize it in the same way John can, but I'm happy to.
We could, you know, at the end of the day, we could work together, whoever presents it, so there's a better, you know, intimate understanding of it. But generally, it would be the board presenting. I would certainly be there to help answer questions, which presumably could come up. Like, well, just like Katie answered, like, what does that number mean? You know, so if we get into that, I would certainly be there. But it's generally would be a board presentation.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great, Susie. If we can request that, would it be helpful if I emailed you tomorrow
Sure.
with that request? Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I
So we
don't
don't
actually
lose it.
know, I don't even know the formal process to get.
So, so the two ways that I've seen things happen is that the mayor will just put it on the agenda. So when she sets the agenda with Harold, they'll decide what's to come forward. And then other times it's a council member requesting, I'd like to hear from, so-and-so. I made a motion a few weeks ago to have open space, the department to come out and do a presentation on, what areas do we have sectioned off for true open space and natural preserve areas. We were getting a lot of questions from residents saying that we're kind of cutting down these areas, and we're actually not. We're expanding some of our open space. So really an informational meeting that'll be coming, a few months ahead. But so that I've seen it happen both ways. So I can ask the mayor, and if she says just make a motion, I'll do that.
So
and then we don't have to set a day.
Right.
I could just get it so it's on the docket to come sometime in the near future.
Thanks, Susie, for helping with that. I think, Katie, Jamie, it sounded like you were in agreement. What do you all think? Any comments to add?
Just that, during the weeks leading up to the election, one of the frustrating things that I heard most frequently was that, some variation of a Longmont resident not knowing about ... not knowing anything about the library, all of its many services, and also the needs specifically. And there's someone else maybe in this room who shared my sentiments, either here or on the Friends board, where way after the election we're talking with somebody about the library, and it comes up, what is really needed, what are the gaps here, and how is it potentially going to impact the community long term? And the person's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And it's like, we just had this on the ballot. There was all this information out there in the ether, and you knew nothing that the library needed more funds to operate? And he was like, no. So I think that's still out there, that people selectively take in information, and often if they don't see, if they're not confronted personally with a visual of the crisis, then it somehow doesn't land, right? Because it's in competition with all of these other needs, and we're in information oversaturated culture. So I think any opportunity that the library has to get out in front of decision makers, in front of the public, and say, look at what we're doing, look at how much we're doing, right? One of the comments I heard all the time was, why does the library need more money? Every time I go there, there's no one there. It's never crowded. They seem like they have enough space. What they're not seeing are all of the activity that's happening online or from people's homes, or the programs that just, again, aren't right in front of you when you walk through the door to pick up your hold. You don't see the, making it up, 100, 200 people stuffed into a room, near the children's department. So, yeah, it's just publicity, right? It's keeping the community informed. Yep.
Yeah, I agree. Any other comments? Okay, Susie, I'll email you tomorrow, just kind of so we can make sure and remember that for me. And then, yeah, let's go ahead and try to get on the agenda in the upcoming months. Thanks for sharing that, John. Anything else, and then the director's report before we move on?
Nope, that's all I had.
Great. I need to switch screens tomorrow, which is next, and I think it is Friends. Yep. Any report from the Friends of the Library liaison?
I was not able to attend last week's meeting. Maybe if there's a nugget. John, you were there. You could share the highlight. But for my part, it's just been getting ready for the sale, which starts on Wednesday and runs through Saturday. And the other conversation topics I know are sort of top of mind on the Friends board is there are 2 spots on the board that are potentially opening up in the not too distant future. I think there's 1 spot that is opening up in the next couple of months with the vice president stepping down. And then there might be some shuffle internally, and then it launched this whole big long conversation last month around what do you call it, like legacy planning, and not only needing to recruit more members and volunteers within the Friends, but to then recruit some of those recruits to join the board, right? And discussing, the various approaches to that, and maybe what types of strategies, what types of outreach would make the most sense. But there was kind of like this little wake-up ripple that I saw go through the room. It's like, oh yeah, when's my term ending? When's my term ending? And like, we're going to need some new people in the pipeline to fill these roles in the next, anywhere from the next couple of months to the next 2 years. So then that connected with it, they're talking about their upcoming retreat and what agenda items might be most highest priority for their retreat. Talking about membership and development, like really sort of fleshing out a membership program or a donor program that has a little bit more structure to it, has maybe some more tiers and some clearer benefits and some clearer language around what that support translates into, literally, in terms of the impact that your membership dollars have, just like you would hear on an NPR or CPR membership drive. Like, Friends can be adapting some more of that language instead of, I think the model that they've had is not helping them to grow, and they're going to need to grow to meet goals, to be able to help the library at the same level that they've been helping the library in the past. I'm trying to think if I'm leaving anything out. There's a lot of things that were kind of interwoven, returning to the question of upgrading the website and the whole client relations management software that's connected to that. And so I don't know where those conversations will lead. Some of them are certainly complex enough that it would make sense to have them in a retreat type setting to allow for more creative, longer conversation, more iterative conversation. But yeah, like a little growing pains. It's kind of exciting. And the sale. Always about the sale. They're doing really well between the bookshop and what we're bringing in with the sales.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I can add from that meeting that they're going to do at the sale is have some signage around. They showed a sample that it basically lists out all the various things that their funding fund, their support funds. So basically, if you buy books, this is what you're funding, and then it lists all of these things out: library of things, discovery, whatever you name it, it's there. And so I think that's not a bad idea to let people know what is my money actually going to. Well, it's going to all these programs. So that was one thought they had, that they plan to implement at this next sale. And then the Friends chair sent me a note that they want to send to council, that is to let council know, or maybe remind council that the library depends on the Friends for 100% of programming. And so that'll be getting sent out. So I think they're also, in addition to everything that Jamie just said, I think they're trying to think about how can we increase communication that really lets people know exactly what this is going towards, and why it's so important. So
I'm curious if they brought up the idea again of having like a little table in the corner during the sale, where instead of telling people or asking them about membership at point of sale, have a separate location for those conversations that has.
For membership?
Yeah, when you said signage, it made me remember.
I don't, do you remember, Tracy, that detail?
I don't know specifically for like memberships. I think they were wanting to kind of have more discussions with patrons not related to the sale. I don't know if it was specifically for memberships, but probably along the same lines, something like that. But I think there was some dissension with the board members of how realistic that is within the space they have available for the sale.
That's true. So that's probably true. And the staffing too, just you know how many other people beyond the members of that board actually sign up to, sit there at the tables. My experience has been that it is more than half board members doing all of that. All right. So I don't have anything else for you.
Well, thanks for that. And for those who don't know, I just want to mention that Jamie also volunteers at those sales, and so recognize your efforts there as well. And I hope and I think this is on us in communications, when we do share about programming coming from the Friends, how unusual that is, and how that is not the ideal function or role of that group. Any other questions for Jamie and John on that? All right, well, let's move on to our city council liaison, and so Susie will pass it to you.
Yeah, so, I kind of embedded a little bit of stuff going on, but again, just informing the council of what the needs of the library are, especially as we start thinking about, the pre-stages of planning the budget. A couple of things that will be coming up to council that we'll be talking tomorrow is our 4th of July event. So in the past, we used to have it at the Boulder County Fairgrounds. They canceled that space during COVID. And then one of the things, and I guess there were other conversations that I really wasn't aware of as to why they decided to stay at Fox Hill Golf Course, including, really concerns from public safety around being able to manage the fallout zone and traffic impacts in and around the, Hover and Rogers Grove, that whole area. So I think that as our population has increased, that area they were determining was less and less feasible. Kiwanis, Public Safety, and Boulder County. So then they had it at Fox Hill Golf Course, but there were concerns that arose there with it being close to the hospital. It's far away from the city center, so there was an equity piece around people before would just be able to go outside of their homes and watch the fireworks, where then a lot of people in town were having to drive to the outskirts to be able to see. And Fox Hill Golf Course, it's a private space. So, again, it was, having to pay to, access food trucks or, whatever they had there. So, so we're going to be talking about it tomorrow. Personally, I would like to see it come back to Boulder County or Boulder County Fairgrounds, somewhere in the center. I heard from residents about, that we're going to have it at Dickens, and I had not heard about that. That's not in my packet. And so I was like kind of taken aback where this idea came from. But we're going to be discussing it all tomorrow as well. And then other things that we're going to be discussing in relation to the 4th of July will be the possibility of moving it to a drone show instead of fireworks because of climate, dry brush, the concerns for wildfires. So that again, that's going to be we're going to kind of mull around the two topics. See what's going on there. I mean, my feeling is, okay, well, let's give it a try. If it flops,
Right.
we have next year. It's, we just won't know if we don't try.
I know your comments.
Either way. Oh, yes.
Uh-huh.
So, and the other, there's things that we could, what we're trying to do is kind of create a space where maybe we just don't have the fireworks show, but we also, by itself, but we also have, kind of like carnival games, food trucks, different other activities as well. So picnicking, live music, so to kind of make it as an event type of thing. So, but it does need to be closer to the center of the city, not, I'm not a fan of it being over where it has been. And I think, so I think one of them, Boulder County Fairgrounds, Dickens Farm, so we're just going to be exploring other options and how we can bring it back. Another item that will be coming, and this was brought forward by Councilmember Yarborough, was around compensation for city council. So currently, every 2 weeks, I bring home my $380 check for my work I do on council. And, that's why I work full time, so I can't afford to do both. But, one of the things that we were looking at was really at sustainability. So not necessarily for those of us who are sitting on council now, but long term, for the next group of people coming in. And, really our community has been very vocal about wanting to have representatives who represent the community. So we have a large portion of people who are working class individuals. So really having that kind of representation on council. And we're not going to get it with the pay that we have. Because, again, people who can afford to stay at home or who can afford to cut to part-time to devote the time needed to run, to be council or mayor, they wouldn't be able to afford to do that. So I think for her, one of the arguments was really looking at long-term. And then, we were going to be looking at comparable cities, Fort Collins. Their council members make $3,321 a month, and our council, we, before taxes, we're $1,000, and I think the mayor is $1,500. So in Fort Collins, then their mayor makes a little under $5,000 a month. Council makes a little more than $3,000 a month. So it's, we're going to be looking at different communities. There are other communities, Aurora, council members and mayor, they all make a little under $1,800 a month. That's it. So, we're going to have a discussion around that as well. And again, that'll be met with opposition and anger and discontent. So, we had our monthly council retreat, or our annual council retreat, and we went over, looked at our goals and objectives, our priorities, that again, they continue to be housing, transportation, and early childhood education. So how those goals really fit into everything else that we're doing as a city around equity, sustainability, core services, making sure that as we expand housing, that the core services we provide to the community is sufficient, sustainable, and accessible. Transportation, we're moving towards Vision Zero, so really that multimodal, sharing the road with pedestrians, cyclists, and cars. We're moving away from that idea of car-centric, and really we're sharing the road with many different types of participants. And the other thing, we're working with different agencies around microtransit. So instead of the large buses through RTD, just smaller vans and like the VIA type services, and having where we're able to get these vehicles out there more frequently to pick up and drop off passengers. We're working with RTD to expand services. When they do the cutoff time at 8 o'clock, it's really not feasible for people who are depending on public transportation. That's the cutoff. So we've had residents who said, they want to come to public invited to be heard at council, but they know they have to be back on the bus by 8 o'clock or before 8 so they can get back home before they end service. So I know that we have flex and other types of public transportation that maybe run a little bit later. But yeah, that was, so that's kind of what we're exploring and seeing how we can expand services. I know RTD really doesn't want to expand services if the ridership is low, but what we're saying is ridership is low because you have not expanded services. It's very inconvenient. If you expand these services, make these stops more frequent, extend the morning and evening times, you'll get more ridership. So we're kind of going back and forth with it. So it's like, the chickens before the egg kind of thing, or whatever. So we'll see. And doing whatever we can to fund it through grants, federal funds, ARPA dollars, on how we can fund the transportation as well as the housing component. And I think that was it. I think the last time they raised the 99? No. They raised the council pay. Yeah, it was in 1999. So.
Well, nothing's really changed.
Yeah, no. Oh my goodness. So any questions, or I'd be happy to, if there's anything, tell me more about that. We can, connect or send me an email.
Well, I personally really hope that they do raise compensation. I think it's so important, and y'all devote so much time and energy to this. I guess the only comment I had is, when I hear early childhood education as one of the council retreat goals, such a tie-in, of course, with library services. So did that come up at all?
Yes.
In that conversation?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And how we have these programming, what I think one of the places we're connecting with is a Wild Plum. What's the one that's near here? TLC? Or is it what? Well, there's an early childhood.
There's Aspen, right?
Aspen, yeah. That's what it is. So, being able to connect library services with some of these nearby child care facilities, especially ones, your Head Start, I think TLC also serves low income. So, there's a lot of opportunity there if, we provide the funding for.
Hey, thank you so much for that update. My next standing, I should pause. Any other questions or comments? Wait, our next standing agenda item is library profession news. We talked a fair bit about that already, from what's happening in the state legislature right now. Anyone else have anything else to bring for that
I do.
agenda item? Go for it.
So last month, you may remember I briefly mentioned this librarian individual that was just starting to kind of explode into what I would call mainstream awareness, right? And I couldn't remember their name at the time, but it's Michael Threes. And I had been following that Instagram account for some time and was just absolutely delighted that this librarian was getting so much positive, infectious attention for our public libraries in just the most the most inclusive way that you can imagine. And so I was really excited to tell all of you about him last month. And I was like, I gotta remember, get the right names or the link so that you can share it out and everything. Then I saw in my feed that Michael was invited to be the keynote speaker for CalCon 24. I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect, this is amazing. I gotta write this down, I gotta tell at the next board meeting, I've gotta share that this is happening too, because this is like the awareness. And now, as I was preparing for this meeting, I saw that Michael Threes is resigning from his position because all of that fame and exposure that brought such light to public libraries around this country had also brought out a lot of visceral. Yes, a lot of less positive energies that were very unfortunately directed at him and making it not only untenable to do his job, but untenable to, difficult to maintain one's mental health. Mm-hmm. So I don't know yet. This just happened a day ago is when it was being reported, so I don't know if Michael will still be participating in CalCon. It sounds like he's stepping away from his position at the library, but he's not stepping away from library advocacy, and would like to have more conversations, even the national level with lawmakers and so forth. So all that to say, I'm very, very concerned about our country. I'm very concerned about our librarians. I'm very concerned about the ones who are working today and the ones who might be vulnerable to being driven out, and the ones that haven't entered the field yet and who may be discouraged from doing so as more and more of these unfortunate events take place. Paired with that, like a fine one, is HB 1661 in Tennessee, which I saved. I could have brought it up when you mentioned, John, the Colorado bill. But this was another thing that just kind of rolled across my radar, and I was like, what? I'm afraid that it's precedent setting. Basically, it's a bill to lower the barriers for community members to have materials removed from public libraries. So to make it even easier. And the language that was being used by the proponents of said bill was very slippery and sounded like it was going to be, they were doing this to help the libraries. Let us come in and take these books off your shelves before an angry community member comes forward. We can proactively, preemptively remove these things. And if we just let
if we just let the residents decide what they consider to be their community standards for obscenity or inappropriate material, right? Like, don't worry about all this First Amendment stuff. Because we here in our little town of, I think it's like Oak Ridge or something, Tennessee, you know, we really know that that stuff doesn't belong here. It's, I would say it's unbelievable, except that enough of this kind of thing is happening now that it is all too believable. But I wanted to bring it to our group's attention because I think things like what John is moving forward with, already having these conversations about updating the challenge request form. It's kind of like we're already supporting legislature in Colorado to lock down, you know, no bans. This is what we mean by free speech, stuff like that. Like, proactively do it now. Do it now so that, you know, if some of these experimental bills start making their way toward us, hopefully we have some things in place that those things just keep on going. They go on to some other library or state. Not good. They're coming from. It was that, you know, it was all the school library stuff that I was hearing about the most for a few months, and now it's starting to be more public library stuff and like sounding alarm.
Yeah, I mean, in
Get ready.
Arkansas for sure, and I think Alabama, they have some things in place that are horrifying, like some laws or policies or such that affect public libraries. In Arkansas, particularly, librarians can be brought up on charges.
Right.
And so there is some wild stuff out there. I say wild, but I hope it whatever this is, that remains like, no, you guys are whatever, but don't have this be a thing that starts growing. I don't think it will, but it's still disturbing. Very much so.
And I'm very concerned that these things are going to start, but that they're going to increasingly disincentivize people from staying in the field, which are in the field. Similar to what prison conditions.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that to our attention. I think that's, a very sad and important conversation to pay attention to, even if it's not, you know, even if our state is moving in a different direction. For anyone who doesn't know, CalCon is the Colorado Association of Library Conference. This year it's at Breckenridge. I haven't attended for many years, but when I have, it's been great. It's in early September and it's open, so I mean it costs the money, but and I want to check this because I'm saying this from my understanding without looking. But I'm, you know, as board members, we could attend. Once again, there is a fee associated. John, I know y'all are going to the public library conference. I think it's in April. I hope that there is funding for y'all to go to the CalCon if that would be of use to you and some of your staff.
I mean, you know,
I'm not sure if that is.
Well, last year it was easier because it was in Loveland, which it had been for many years. You know, with PLA and the staff going, of course, I got funding for that from the Friends, but my existing professional development budget would barely support that because then it's far enough to require, you know, more financial commitment, right? So mileage and obviously room and board and that adds up quickly, so that's going to be pretty challenging. But it's not out of the question, at least to maybe get 1 or 2 people. But with CalCon, when it was in Loveland, I was able to send a number of people, and so that was great. But we'll see. But you're right, like boards and commissions. In fact, they have specific tracks sometimes, or at least sessions for that. Some of it's, it depends on the conference, but there's usually sessions that are specific to boards and commissions. So it's worth looking at if they've gotten far enough to have any specific sessions or agenda like that. So far, the person that Jamie brought up is still on the agenda because they just sent that out today. But his announcement of resigning was so recent that I don't know, if that were made or not.
Well, I'll try to keep an eye out and see if there is a session specific to boards and commissions and send that out to this group. Okay, moving on. Library board comments. Any further comments from any members of the board? Okay, our next thing. Okay.
No, I'm just gonna say, because I'm not library board at this point, but I wanted to share something with the board at the end of the meeting. So if there's no board comments, I can do that now. This might end this on a little more positive note than censorship.
Yes.
Which is we need to talk about, but I just wanted to share with this board. I received a thank you note today, randomly. This doesn't happen very often. Usually if I get a note in the mail, it's something I probably don't want to read. But this is short, so I'll read it to you all. My husband and I moved to Longmont a couple of years ago and are so impressed with the services the Longmont Library provides. We appreciate being able to hold books and pick them up from the library. This is a tremendous service. Recently, we have noted your offerings of Library of Things, the Seed Garden, and the multiple CD and DVD offerings and audiobooks. Congratulations also on your very effective ways to engage a diverse community. Signed, a happy patron. So I just wanted to share that because for someone to take the time to write something, and we all know how that goes. Most feedback people leave are willing to leave is not this nature. So I just thought you guys would all appreciate hearing that. I did.
Thanks for sharing that. That's really heartwarming.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought about writing a thank you note for the thank you note.
I know.
I want to include that if we, something to consider when we do share the annual report at council. That type of feedback as well is so powerful.
Yeah, and
thanks, John.
And a staff member told me too over the weekend, a patron was up in the computer lab and stopped one of the staff and just said, I just wanted to say that I got my high school degree because of this library. I did all my coursework here, and without it, I wouldn't have a high school degree. So, talk about a story to share.
Please keep his permission.
I know. What's your name?
Quote him, no,
Yeah, no, you're right.
anonymously.
Yeah, you're right.
Quote him and put it on the annual report.
Yeah.
And let him
Yeah, I know, the anecdotal things are
Yes,
great.
yes, that's awesome. Powerful.
Oh, thanks. That is a great note to end on. Okay, our next meeting is scheduled March 18th. That is the first day of St. Mary's spring break. So if somebody that makes someone not able to attend, please just let us know. Make sure we'll have a quorum. But otherwise, I will adjourn us at 8:53.